Kia ora and welcome to Workers' Voice. Spend the next hour with us as we discuss the tribulations and triumphs of building workers' rights and increasing fairness in the workplace. This show is produced by Unite Union.
Kia ora and welcome to this week's Workers' Voice. I'm your host, Joe Carolan from Unite Union. And again, I'm joined with a great panel of activists. So directly across from me, my old comrade from Dublin, Gary Cranston. And Gary's a Unite organiser. And Gary, you're just back from the big climate change protests in Paris.
Yeah, Joe. I was over there for 12 days of the 2-week-long conference, the United Nations climate change negotiations, as a part of the International Trade Union Confederation. So this is the conference that people might have seen a bit of news about leaders of the world making some sort of an agreement to recognise that they should do something about climate change. So it was a very interesting and intense experience being there, not just inside the conference itself. So I was there as an observer, and watching the negotiations from the inside, but also joining with activities that were happening on the outside. So people from various different movements around the world, say defending people from the effects of the kind of frontline effects of fossil fuel extraction, and people severely affected by climate change today as well. So there was a lot of meetings outside of them conferences as well, of the conference itself. Some really, really, really great and inspiring stuff happening around the world.
Great, and we'll get into that. And then on my right, but by no means on my political right at all, I'm joined by my comrade from the Mana Movement, Trei Repia. Trei, how are you?
Kia ora, Joe. Good, thanks.
I've pulled you away at very short notice today, so thanks for coming.
You're
we're
welcome.
going to be talking about Waitangi. Waitangi's coming up. Yeah. What's the plan this year, do you know?
Well, I think there's going to be a bit of fireworks going on this year at Waitangi. I think it's the place to be in early February for the whole week, actually, because there'll be quite a few activities going on. Looking forward to seeing what's in the political forum tents and the kōrero that comes out of there, discussions, debates, and particularly what will go on at Te Marae when John Key makes his entrance.
Now, we're running a bus up as well to Waitangi, so if there's anybody, if this goes out beforehand and you want to go, my number is 029 4455 702. We might be able to get you up cheap. And if you've never been there, it's awesome, eh? And finally, on my extreme hard left, joined by Chris Rigby. Chris is a good mate of mine from the union movement. And Chris, you're with the new E2 union.
Yeah, the new E2 union. It's an amalgamation of what was formerly EPMU, Engineering, Printing and Manufacturing Union, and the SFWU, or Service and Food Workers Union. There'd been a process going for the last couple of years, but in October last year it finally became one big union of over 50,000 members, and it's interesting. It's sort of too early to really say what to expect from that, but I'm remaining optimistic that working people will benefit greatly from it.
Now, one thing that working people will not benefit from greatly is this Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and there's going to be protests in the next period coming up about that. Chris, why is it not good for workers, the TPPA?
Why is it not good for workers? Well, is there anything good for workers in it? A key thing that jumps to mind at the moment is that the TPP is driven by corporations. For example, if a law was changed by the New Zealand government under the TPPA and a law is changed to benefit workers, there's a chance that if they could financially impact on a large multinational corporation financially, that corporation could sue the New Zealand government for any loss of money that they may make, which is going to be a deterrent for the New Zealand government to improve workers' conditions. So that's one thing I can think of.
Righty-ho. Now, look, these three things are all related, right? The earth, the indigenous people, who take care of it, and then workers' rights under the corporations that are trying to destroy it. Yeah, we think that this movement for climate to protect our earth, the movement for indigenous control over the land, and workers being under attack from corporations. I mean, people would call these, what's the new word now, intersectionality. Do you know what I mean? That we need to actually unite these struggles. Gary?
And that's what I saw in Paris. You know, these were the groups, the biggest groups of people that were there calling for justice, calling for governments to put measures into the text of the agreement that would protect workers, indigenous people, people who would be more vulnerable to climate change, the effects of climate change, and to protect them in some way through putting in wording into the text that would protect them against, not just against climate change is the important thing, but also against the possible negative consequences for people of policies that are put into place supposedly to tackle climate change. And so this was a key part of the whole discussion in Paris, which was these people fighting on the inside and arguing that the rights of more vulnerable people will be recognised in the text, and also people on the outside meeting up and running forums and big discussions with hundreds and hundreds of people in the room about how they're fighting to protect themselves from fossil fuel extraction projects and the kind of industrial processes that cause climate change.
Now, when you say fighting to protect from fossil fuel extraction, I mean, when I think of the campaigns that Mana, for example, has been involved in, I mean, Tanga Te Whenua have really led the environmental movement in the last period, Tracy. You know, we think Statoil, Deep Sea Oil, you know, people like Ruben Taipira, Tirana Porter and all those comrades.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, really, you know, when you look at the Rokumara Basin on the east coast and what Dale Takitimu and the whānau of Te Whānau Apanui did, yeah. You know, that was really people, indigenous people, Māori people standing up for the rights of their papamoana, the rights of the whenua, because nobody was going to speak for it other than those who live beside it and to protect it. And you saw that with the Rena disaster, which still has adverse effects for them today. So then you head to the far north and you see a lot of the deep sea drilling, and of course you have Ruben Taipari and all the whānau te huku up there, you know, working really hard to keep Statoil out of their waters, Mike Smith included. And, you know, it's just a real struggle to actually even get the government to listen to what the people's needs are, you know, so yeah.
And they were represented in Paris. They were there, yeah. So we were hanging out outside and inside and keeping an eye on the politicians, what they were doing, what they weren't doing.
Well, I was keeping an eye on you, Gary, avidly, because let's not forget the backdrop to the Paris protests, and they were supposed to be the biggest climate protests in history, yet you had that very unfortunate terrorist attack a couple of weeks beforehand, and the media and the political establishment started ramping up what we call the strategy of tension to terrify people from using their democratic rights. Now, as I later found out, football matches weren't cancelled. Big pop gigs weren't cancelled. U2 played a week later. The only thing that seemed to be cancelled was people's right to protest anything.
Yeah, and I mean, the good thing was that people did come out on the last 2 days in quite serious numbers, you know, and they still did, despite that, which was a really good thing. You know, there was a battle for the 2 weeks of the conference, like a battle for the last word, where there was negotiations going on. And all this debate in the media about, you know, should we be allowed to protest, or are we going to protest anyway? And there was different groups taking different approaches to that. The most hard-lined of which was a group called the Climate Games, who had organised decentralised actions all over the city, you know.
Is that like the Hunger Games, is it?
Well, yeah, in the context of climate change it would be, yeah. And they just immediately, almost after the the state of emergency was declared, they said, we don't care, we're doing this anyway. And they did, and there was, I don't know, 50 or more, or maybe hundreds of autonomous little actions going off all over the city. People running into fossil fuel company offices and banks and everything, and disrupting things, throwing paint on their doors,
shocking,
and all sorts of stuff like
behavior.
that. And
all this madness in.
And so these people were put under house arrest quite early on, actually, too. And I think that was a message to the rest of the movement to say, if you don't obey this state of emergency, we're going to lock you up. And they did lock about 27 of them up.
One group that I saw that was that broke through that kind of media silence on it were a group of First Nation people from Turtle Island, particularly Canada and stuff. I mean, we've been in touch with the Mi'kmaq people in, where is it, New Brunswick, the East Coast, over the fracking there, when the Canadian state used the Mounties and armed the army against women and children.
So that was the Indigenous Environmental Network.
Right.
Some from Turtle Island, they'd say. So Canada and North America. And but also there were people from the Pacific in that group as well. And so they were doing actions and activities together that were some of the ones they did were absolutely breaching the state of emergency. So they were the ones that had the guts to go and do it anyway. Having said that, on the last day, when the big actions were happening, they did a ceremony in the morning, and that was broken up by the police. So there was all these different times when the police showed a bit of power, But in general terms, as someone who was there, I can tell you that it was nothing like as tense or as fearful as it was put across in the media deliberately. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like that on the streets of Paris. You would see some, a couple of times a day, you'd see groups of police around, mainly around climate change related kind of things, but not that many of them, and not that many soldiers. It was a big game. It was a game that was played by the government, because a government hosting one of these climate change negotiations, as we saw in Copenhagen, is under tremendous pressure to make it look as though they did the very best job they could of getting everyone to agree on something. Mm-hmm. Now, in the context of a state of emergency, that can be easier. So what they were doing, I think, was trying to scare the crap out of everybody, so that they wouldn't come out at the end, so that they could control the messaging at the end and go, oh, look what a great job we did. Now, despite that, thousands and thousands came out in the end anyway.
It's a well-proven thing, the strategy of tension. I was at the big anti-globalization protests, I wasn't at Seattle, but I was at Genoa and the Melbourne one, where we closed down the World Economic Forum with Nandor and Sue at the Crown Casino in Melbourne. And that was great. Thousands of people, non-violent, direct action, though, blocking the things. Do you think there's a bit of strategy of tension in the air at the minute, particularly around the TPPA? Trace?
I think that the topic deserves conversation, especially because people are starting to get quite desperate around it, and you are starting to see everyday New Zealanders sort of starting to question more and more and more, what is this thing? Even though there's been huge vamp up since, for Mana, it was in 2012 when Jane Kelsey approached Tone Harawira to discuss the TPPA, and I just happened to be on staff with them at the time. It's been around a while, but for everyday New Zealanders or middle New Zealand, it's kind of like they're not really sure what it is or how it affects them. So did we do our job of information and education? I think as best that people could. Could it have been better? Yes, because, for example, I'm in my shop today and I get hundreds of customers coming through and they all start talking about the TPPA. Whereas 5 months ago in the same shop, nobody had a clue what it was. So there is a lot more information and education coming out purely because the media has started to jump all over it. I just want to digress a little bit to what you said, Gary, around the Pacifica people in France, in Paris. you know, one of the things I was really disappointed in with New Zealand's media feedback was when they talked about the COP21 document and how it was going, and it was supposedly all these wins for New Zealand. There was no discussion about how the Pacifica people were faring. Yet we're getting like direct information from the islands that things aren't looking good for the climate over there. And, you know, you've got Tuvalu, the Kiribati, their island's sinking. And yet, you know, there's been absolute silence from our government around that. And, you know, that needed a discussion, at least media air, because there's so many Pacifica people that live here today in New Zealand.
Well, there's a shameless example there of the government deporting a man from Kiribati who was claiming refugee status, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Trei, do you think, I mean, we had that refugee crisis. We have the biggest refugee crisis in the world at the minute, 65 million people. You know, in terrible states. And there's a debate in New Zealand, should we double the quota, increase the quota? Do you think we have a responsibility to our brothers and sisters in the Pacific to help them with the real problems of eco-refuge?
I think, you know, we must look at helping those who are closest to us, and anybody that we can take, really, who is not, you know, their families are not in good situations. I mean, torn families in Syria, you know, that's huge. Why wouldn't you take people in that situation? You know, we all have hearts, but especially with our Pacifica people, because where are they going to go? You know, the islands and the atolls, you know, that their whole country is made up of small atolls. Once those, you know, go into the water, we're almost the closest thing to it, us in Australia. So, you know, we should have that discussion.
There's a great deal of debate in various parts of the Pacific about what appropriate sort of solutions could be, and to some people, some sections of different populations, they don't want to talk about having to come to another place as well, and that is not, you know, that's not an option. Then again, to other parts, they want to talk about reparations and they want to talk about adaptation, and then there's some very controversial discussions around saying, yeah, we don't want to talk about being able to move to New Zealand, but certain sections of maybe power in the Pacific want adaptation funding so that they can adapt in one way or another, and there's questions around whether that would get to the right places as well. It's a very complex debate, very interesting and ever-changing too. So, yeah, a variety of views expressed in Paris too, yeah.
Well, imagine people don't want to leave the country that they're trying to fight for, but if your country's sinking through no fault of your own and the land's been destroyed by salt water, you know, I mean, this is the crime that the people who are least responsible for the destruction of the climate are the ones who are going to pay.
No, absolutely. You know, the French in the nuclear testing in the Pacific have a lot to answer for. I mean, these islands, even, you know, if you talk about the Rarotongan Island and the coral reefs dying, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's been going on. But nonetheless, you know, we're humans, we have responsibility to one another to take care of each other.
Interesting you mentioned the French there, Gary. Just shortly after you were in France, 30% of the population or something massive in many working class areas voted for the fascist party, the National Front.
Yeah.
What was the story there, man?
I don't know. Maybe someone made them a little bit afraid of something just before the voting happened.
Of refugees.
Of terrorism. And yeah, I think that there was a bit of that in the air at the time, I think.
Of course, the French state has never used terrorism against our people.
Never sunk any boats or anything.
Or killed 600 Arab people on a bridge in 1961 in Paris. Chris, I'm going to bring you in here, a bit of controversy here now. Because unions turned up en masse, Gary, for the climate change march here in Auckland. It was a really good show, and well done to you and Suha, Sid Aksoy and others there. and great to see it, really. But Chris, now, not in some unions, this is slightly controversial because, of course, we're dealing with workers who might be working in the oil industry, in extraction, in mining. The idea of transition might be a new one for some people, and then, of course, you've fused two unions with two different cultures. How's that working?
That's obviously a moving feast, that one, and that is a real issue. That's why, say, for example, under the EPMU, you didn't often hear a lot about climate change or the environment, and that being because we got 3,000 or 4,000 people at the time who worked in coal mines or at a steel mill or something like that. What I fortunately do know, and I know that the talks were happening up to a few years ago when I worked down on the West Coast for 2 or 3 days to help out our mines organiser at the time. And what he said is through the Mining Council is there was I suppose sort of a political split there, but quite a conservative sort of faction, but also a group that was starting to have that conversation about, what happens when mining ends. We know it's not going to last forever, so how do we prepare ourselves to move on to, generating, working in the renewable energy industry. That part of our union it's a bit of a it's sort of looked after by the miners, so I don't have a lot to do with it, but I do know that those discussions are starting to happen. Unfortunately, I can't tell you how far along they've moved, but realistically, it is something that I think we'll see more of in the future.
There was a great report written in collaboration, I believe, with workers over there and different sections of the community by an organisation called Coal Action Network Aotearoa, and they've written a report called Jobs After Coal, and that is a part of trying to help that conversation grow and become. It may well have been
what I
bet it was. Yeah.
And because there's a great tradition of struggle there, right, amongst those miners. I mean, it's the close to slavery you can get under the capitalist system. We were watching that film Pride, great film about intersectionality, about how young gay and lesbian activists from a socialist background in London went to support a mining community in Wales and, helped to open up the conversation about gay and lesbian liberation with them, right? And then they returned that solidarity by leading the Pride March in 85. A beautiful film, right? But halfway through it, one of the comrades turns around to me and goes, it's great, this intersectionality and stuff, except no one's talking about the environment, and probably Thatcher closing down the coal mines, although it destroyed the working class, destroyed towns and stuff, probably had a good effect on the environment. And I was like, there must be better ways to transition than that. Essentially, that's the kind of argument, isn't it, Chris, to be one?
Yes, it's... you want the workers on side.
There was a huge range of opinions within the International Trade Union Confederation as well over there. So, look, all the different unions are on different pages with this. They represent different workers that have very different interests to one another, and it's going to be a long process and huge big conversations around this. There was one union there, the CGT, a huge union in France that represents a lot of transport workers.
Congrès Général des Travailleurs.
They're hardcore, right? They also represent a lot of nuclear workers as well. And one of the things that they had a problem with, in particular, was that the words decent work didn't get into the section that they wanted in the document, right? Now, there's just two words, right? Decent work. They refused to celebrate a deal that didn't have this text in it because their workers, some of them are, have really quite decent jobs, and they're not going to transition from that to some crappy kind of low-paid jobs.
Minimum wage. What's wrong with that? I'll give you just a 0-hour contract there now.
The transition is going to have to be one with decent work as well, of course. So real good jobs coming along, to replace them.
I think when you were over there, you met my old mate there, Jonathan Neal.
I did, yeah.
Who's an eco-socialist, and he's campaigning for 1 million green jobs.
Yeah.
That's something that could help Maori communities as well, up north as well. Huh?
Oh, I think so. I mean, at the moment they have participation partnerships with DOC, but I don't know how well that's working. I suppose for some it's good. But what does that even mean, decent work, when it comes to mining? I mean, at the end of the day, who wants it? We don't need it. We actually need to protect the whenua as it is. Papatūānuku is not going to be okay with all this. I mean, imagine you were being gouged and then, I'll plant some plants behind me as I go and let's see how that goes. And then, I mean, we've seen devastation in New Zealand around mining. Look at the pipe mines and what's happened to those families, and nothing. The government hasn't even been able to take care of their families, nor have they truly acknowledged what has happened, and it's just been brushed to the side. We don't hear about it anymore, yet these families are still living with the tragedy of what's occurred.
Sure.
Yes, we need to fight for, things, but we should fight before they happen so that they don't happen. At the end of the day, I don't think the whānau from Tai Toketo are going to withstand all that sort of stuff, because when I think of whakapara, for example, in the north, where there will be tremendous mining for gold, and I know the people from whakapara, this is not going to be okay with a lot of them, especially the locals. And even when you drive up the north today, you see all of their activist protest signs totally against the mining, so it's in the hearts of the local people. But when you talk to the wider New Zealand network, what you seem to hear is, but it creates jobs.
Is this the gold that they use mercury or something to get it out, and the mercury will poison the water table? Is that it?
Yeah, I'm definitely not the expert on what will happen inside the environment up at whakapara. There's a lot of key people like Christy Hinare. She knows a lot more about what the effects will be. However, I mean, at the end of the day, the locals know that, with all those sort of things, it will pollute their waterways, their streams, their forests, and the animals.
And that brings us to the question about how best to fight things like this strategically, right? There's been 21 years of climate change negotiations. Governments don't give a crap. They don't care. They're not going to care. But we have had decades of successful struggle against extraction projects that have awful effects on people locally. And when people have fought these projects locally, instead of expecting and hoping that the government is going to do something about it, my experience in looking at struggles like that is that that's when they win. They win when they fight them themselves on the doorstep in their communities where they have power. They don't have power in the beehive or somewhere else, but they do have power at home, and then companies can't beat them because they're too good at home.
You mentioned an interesting stat, Gary, how many power stations have been closed down by governments, like
in the US.
Yeah.
So there was a big announcement there last week. I wish I could remember now. I think Obama brought in a new law banning coal mining on, I think it was federal land, and everyone goes, "Oh my God, well, that's Obama." Well, what people don't know about is that I think it's over 90% of coal-fired power stations have been stopped by community groups in America. 90%.
Yeah.
In the last few years, and hundreds and huge amounts of coal mines. So when Obama does this, he's only catching up to what people are doing on the ground. You just don't hear about these struggles on the ground that are winning.
Direct action works.
They don't have a big giant communications department like Obama does to celebrate every tiny little thing that he does when he takes credit for other people's work. So it's important to understand, I think, where power is, and let's find ways of amplifying that so that we can win.
And so with the victories, for example, against Petrobras that you mentioned on the East Coast, Trei, or the Statoil struggle, Tangata Whenua have really played a leading part there. But there's room for other people to get in behind, do you think?
Look, there's always a two-pronged approach to anything for Indigenous people. One is to fight on the land, and the second one is to fight in Parliament. So, you had really awesome wahine toa like Dale Takitimu taking that case to Parliament, to the Beehive. And, it was quite effective. She was able to negotiate with key people inside of there to discuss what was going on with the Raukumara Basin and so on and so forth. And she's still very much in that kaupapa. And then you had all the flotillas going out there in the waters, and you had Elvis getting arrested later for sailing in his boat and sailing too close. But
now,
you know,
that's not Elvis who goes around with the aliens playing rock and roll. Now this is another Elvis, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it's another Elvis. He actually had a court case, I believe, towards last year, and I think he came up pretty okay considering. But you know, he became a hero to the locals because he went out there, he did direct action, he tried to play it as safe as possible, but it was really about creating the presence on the land.
You think sometimes it's necessary for us to take direct action, even if we're a minority of people?
I think if you want the world to see what's going on and you want other people in your own lands to see what's going on, you do need to have some type of direct action. Again, it's that two-pronged approach. If you don't have the voices on the outside and the voices on the inside, you're kind of just jumping up and down and screaming and throwing yourself around. But you know, media plays a huge role in that. If you can get media presence, then yeah, you're pretty much going to get it out there to the world.
Now, Chris, you've got a wee song about all of this, I believe, called Protest and Survive. Do you want to give us a wee bit of background?
It's by a band called Discharge. They were around in the early 80s, are still around now. They were the forerunners of music which became sort of grindcore bands like Napalm Death followed after them. And there's quite a simple song. This song's quite simple. It's got two lines other than protest and survive, and that is the savage mutilation of the human race is set on course, and it's up to us to change that course. So it's fairly simple and to the point and probably relevant to this conversation.
And here it is, Protest and Survive. It's Monday morning and I haven't had me coffee yet. Now, Gary, did you see that now, that they're predicting global revolution because apparently the latest commodity that we're going to run out of is coffee?
Is that right?
If I don't have me bloody coffee on a Monday morning, I'll tell you what.
Well, if it gets a little bit warmer up north, we'll be able to grow coffee there. You already can, just about, I believe, so.
In eco-socialist, indigenous-run communities.
There you go, subtropical weather up there.
Now, listen, this brings it up to the main thing coming up now, which is the TPPA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, is due to be signed February the 4th. Mr. Key is inviting people from the, 12, 16 signatory countries, something like that, to Sky City Casino, which is a workplace that I helped to unionise. Speaking personally, as a trade unionist, this will give huge power to corporations to ignore the sovereign, if you want to call it that, laws of many of the signatory countries, particularly when it comes to environmental protection and labour protection too. There's huge anger about this, and there's also a growing awareness. I mean, there's a movement on the rise really around this, but it's really coming to the crunch now. Chris, will the unions be there? Will they be marching against the TPPA?
I think you'll find the answer to that is yes. I'm not sure of the full details behind that, but I do know I saw an email this morning inviting us to attend. So, as organisers, so that no doubt will lead to our members being invited to attend also through our networks.
Gary, you expecting a turnout?
Yeah, I know that there's an event at the town hall on the 26th. Is it? Is that right, Joe?
Tomorrow. Yeah, but it'll probably be finished by the time this goes there.
True. Yeah. And there's some sort of a festival being put on as well on the 4th.
A protestival.
A protestival.
Tell us, Gary, what is a protestival? I must be an old fella now. I can't keep up with these things.
I don't know if it's a protest or a festival or which comes first, but. It's not going to be. That won't be at Sky City itself, but there's some festival put on with music as well. But also there may be other events organised on the day as well on the 4th. But details I think still to emerge about that.
Still to emerge. Now, Tracy, one person who was really outspoken at the last TPP rally, I thought provided great leadership, was Hone Harawira. Do you know our mana? I mean, I know a lot of people are coming down from north, for example, for the protests. Is there going to be a mobilisation?
I'd say so, a natural one. I've had a lot of communication with some Manarites in the recent 2 weeks, just asking, where do we meet and what do we do? a lot of them that don't normally get involved with direct action protests, or have ever done it before, and even those in Māori organisations and movements like the Kohanga Reo, have had a lot of whānau asking me if it will be safe for them, and so that's a key concern for some of us as well, and I would assume so, because most of New Zealand will be there. If not, they'll be watching. So yes, I think mana and Māoridom will be there. Most definitely.
Now, you mentioned the word safe. Is it safe to protest in New Zealand? I've been on protests here for 15 years. And nearly all the protests I've ever been in, the protesters are non-violent. But sometimes committed to direct action. Like when we're on a workers' picket line, we maintain our picket. We keep it up. And, for example, in the McDonald's strikes, there was unfair policing, we thought, where there was a huge amount of police resources to push workers who were on strike, so people could get in and get a burger. Right?
Well, then that's when we learned that the police themselves are getting half-price burgers, up until they got snapped by Unite Union.
Isn't that called bribery?
Apparently the police minister denied that such a thing would ever happen.
Oh, I'm sure he
did. And then she wasn't the police minister a week later.
Look, I'm sure there'll be lots of different groups and various denominations of people at the protest on the 4th. What I do know, though, is, if New Zealanders are going to come out in force, it'll be pretty stupid for the police to try and get out there and start bustling them around for no good reason. I mean, a protest hikoi is a protest hikoi, and sure, we walk and we march and we chant. So, that's not what it's really about. But however, if people get out there and do direct action and it becomes that way, well, good to them too. Because at the end of the day, people have to be able to express themselves the way that they need to in terms of how they're feeling, as long as no oldies, the kaumātua queer and the children and the mothers don't get harmed in that event.
Sure.
So for Māori, we just want to maintain that everybody's safe inside of the hikoi itself, but sometimes direct action is the only way to get their attention.
Well, it looks like the police are getting ready for a fight, quite clearly, doing their what they call riot control training. And yeah, I agree, Joe. When we had our pickets on at McDonald's, it wasn't until direct action is being taken, as in there is a picket line in front of that McDonald's store, that the police decide that they are then going to use violence to stop not other violence happening, but from effective direct action from happening. That's what it's about. The violence doesn't come out when people are marching somewhere, because they're just that marching and expressing something is one thing, but stopping something or starting something from happening is different, and that's the line, and that's when the violence comes out, because that's when it starts becoming directly effective.
A wise man from Germany, Karl Marx, once says that the state has a monopoly on violence.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've got the money for it, don't they?
Chris?
You reiterate the point there. I think I think it's important to just be aware that it's likely that someone not on our side of things might be looking to initiate something that could be used to shame the movement in the media and to wider New Zealand, and just to be aware of that and not to react to that. I think that's the most sensible sort of attitude to take on this.
But we've got a mass movement, lots of people. I mean, you're talking, for example, in your shop, people coming in, going, stuff this. I know for a fact a lot of my workers were on the last TPP march. What surprised me was there was more of them there than at some of the other things, like bread and butter ones, like the Hikoi for Homes, for example. So I think the education is quite, high. It's getting through on this.
Well, I saw a survey last week that showed that 40 to 50% of people who were opposed to the TPPA were supportive of and would have taken part in a blockade over this. So the sentiment about taking actual direct action against it, it's absolutely there. It just remains to be seen what different parts of the movement arrange and plan for the 4th.
It's what the direct action is,
Well, it was taking part in a. Would you take part in a blockade? Yes, 40 to 50% of people who were opposed to the TPPA and had signed petitions against it. So there's an appetite there to do something like that. Everybody wants to express things as well, and will too. But as I say, I don't know. I'm not deeply involved in any of the organisations that are planning anything around them days. So.
And I mean, there's going to be diversity in any mass movement, right? So, on the right, for example, I see now that the Labour Party are making noises about the TPPA. Kelvin Davis, our old friend, Tracy, and Angry Andrew. I think you're worried that there could be violence coming from Andrew Little.
I think if Angry Andrew shows up on the day, I mean, I hope there's no, we'll have to bring the kids home and everything.
You're not bringing the kids there near that one, guys.
Well, actually, I wasn't sure where Labour really sat on things for a long while.
I don't think anyone does. I don't think they do either.
I'm not sure if they actually believe what they're saying half the time. I mean, sometimes it's like you see these groupings come in late in the piece when it's almost too late anyway. On the 4th, if it's signed, how much have these political parties done to actually get out there, educate and inform people? I've always looked to the left and looked to the right, and I've seen a lot more just everyday New Zealanders and some celebrities get on board this kaupapa.
Sure.
And that's been
some
really
rugby
awesome.
Stars?
Look, Piri Weepu.
Good on him.
He's the man.
Good on him.
and Jimmy Jackson. So they were looking to touch people from diverse parts of New Zealand as well. The young, the old, and all those of us in between. And so that's really helped that has really helped the struggle to become real for everyday New Zealanders. So there are approaches that work for different parts of New Zealand. And we've just got to be aware of that. We're all diverse groupings, people, even activists. We're all diverse as activists. So sure. At the end of the day, we take the measures that we best need to take.
I have a controversial question for you, because you mentioned that you needed two approaches. You needed the approach on the ground, the whenua, the people, the tangata, but you also needed an approach in Parliament, right? Now, I see at one of these things they've invited the Maori Party to speak. Now, I would be opposed to that. A, because they're a right-wing party. B, because they're in government. And if they were sincere, like you were saying, you know, not just jumping on the bandwagon at the end, if they were sincere, they could bring the government down if they walked.
Yeah, well, that's right. Like I said, the TPPA has been around a long while, and in 2012, Mana was definitely bringing it to the surface. At Waitangi, we actually launched our first anti-propaganda pamphlet about it after speaking with Jane Kelsey, and, you know, Māori Party just weren't saying boo. And, no, e hara he whakaiti ki a rātou. It's not about saying, well, I disagree with you totally, but where were you sitting on that kaupapa? Because our people needed you. Not tomorrow, they need you today. And they still remain silent. I haven't heard a boo from Te Urere or Flavel. Have any of you? No. And so that's pretty tragic, I think, especially for the independent Māori voice, and we don't hear the voice.
But maybe, again, this is another case of people being a million miles ahead of the people who are supposed to be representing them. Like I was saying about the coal mines and the power stations and stuff in America, people are doing it. They're doing it. They're winning, right? And where's the government? Nowhere. Or, you know, coming in at the last minute and just saying a few things, being vague about it, you know? So where is the power? Well, the power is with people on the ground, right?
It needs to be more than coming in at the 11th hour when it's convenient and they don't really have to commit to anything.
Yeah, well, that's not an accident.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of like piecemeal, really, isn't it? Bit of grandstanding towards the end, but where were you throughout the whole event? And, you know, where did you really stand on? I mean, fair enough, we had to wait for the text to get out there, but I read the text and I was like, I don't see how this benefits many people in New Zealand as a whole. You know, so we really just got to be aware that people have to stand up and fight back.
It seems that, without naming names, a lot of the lack of action was based on the fear of being accused of being anti-trade. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Listen, we're going to go and talk about Waitangi to finish up our show, but before we do, Tracy picked a song for us, a beautiful song that I remember from the Operation Ed film at the end, by Aotearoa activists. Could you tell us a wee bit about the song and the meaning that it has for you?
Oh, the singer of the song is Magic Polder, and the song's Acoustic Activist. I met Magic and her father and brother Robbie when we did the hikoi from Rerenga Wairua to Parliament for the Taku Taimoana. So it was in 2010, and there was a small grouping of us. Ruben Taipari was part of that as well, Ruben Porter. The Foreshore and Seabed 2004 Act was just being repealed, and it was being replaced with the Marine Area Coastal. We decided to march again because really it was just a name change and things were just as bad as they were in the legislation. Magic and her father were on the hikoi with us all the way through, and she's a brilliant singer. She's sort of, for an Indigenous wahine, she's just gorgeous. So, you know, I chose the song because it makes sense.
And is this about the Tuhoi Reds? Was it
it did feature in Operation 8. It's a song of struggle. It's got a bit of a reggae thing to it. That always touches the heart of Māori people anyway. It was about the Tuhoi raids and the various things that the Tuhoi people had to endure during the raids. Yeah.
Kia ora, and here it is, Prisoner in Aotearoa.
I'm an alien. I'm a legal alien. I'm a prisoner in Aotearoa. I'm an alien. I'm a legal alien. I'm a prisoner in Aotearoa. I'm an alien. I'm a legal alien. I'm a prisoner in Aotearoa. Everybody out there, wave your flags in the air. Whakaminenga, tino rangatira, mana motu hake, moake, woyo, woyo, yo, yo, woyo, woyo, yo, yo. Sing if you feel me, woyo, woyo, yo, yo. Somebody tell me why you're why. Somebody tell me why I'm an alien. I'm a legal alien. I'm a prisoner in Aotearoa.
Prisoner in Aotearoa, beautiful song there, and we remember those times when those raids happened and the people who stood with Tuhoi People Unite Union. We helped to play a leading role in the defence of the people then. Waitangi Day is coming soon, and I see that our right-wing pundits out there, like Mike Hoskins and Paul Henry and stuff, are doing the same old boring old line that it's Waitangi Day and why can't we all just blah, 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 blah. I think it's been time for some left-wing shock jock attack back. And look, Waitangi Day is a beautiful day. I've gone up the last 3 years to Waitangi Day. Everyone should go up. If you're a Pakeha, if you're Tauiwi or a migrant worker, I think you should come up and stand in solidarity with Maori people and actually learn and listen to. It's a great political education for activists. We're bringing up union members on a bus that we're organising, so the more the welcome. Tress, what can we look forward to this year?
Well, I think the news has pretty much been covering it, hasn't it? I mean, there is a bit of controversy at Te Marae with Kingi Taurua and his stance as a kaumātua wanting to lock out the Prime Minister from if he's going to go ahead with the signing. I mean, the reality is the signing would have had been done on the 4th, and of course Waitangi is the 6th. So, you know, you've got to really ask yourself, you know, how far is Māoridom really going to go if this goes ahead? And, you know, I believe when Kingi says, you know, we're not happy with this, I kind of wonder where the voice came in a bit late. Why wasn't it being heard a bit earlier in the piece? But at the same time, I support the stance of the whānau up at Te Marae. If that's what they want to do, who is John Key to say he's allowed to enter and he will be attending and that nobody will be stopping? I'm sorry, but there's protocol in marae. If you're not welcome, you won't get a pōwhiri. Now, however, I mean, okay, leave that to the whānau of Te Marae. Flip switching again, you know, Horne's take on it was really... no mai haramai. That sometimes the best place to talk politics and to talk about the issues and to discuss them, as you've seen at Rātinapa, is on the marae. So Horne's saying, we welcome you, John Key, to talk about those things on the marae because that's where discussions of even our rangatira head were on the marae. Not saying that John Key is a rangatira. But I think the people that go to Waitangi and that will go there with a TPPA issue, a climate change issue, Māori Indigenous issues, they'll want to know, they want to be able to say something and hear what he has to say and respond.
Gary, you heading up to Waitangi this year?
Yeah, I'm going to be heading up, yeah. I was up the other, last year, where there was a great hikoi organised, and I arranged a bus, went up with a bunch of people to join in with that hikoi, and so it's part of the same mission this year, but this time with the TPPA in the background. So yeah, I'll be there. Yeah.
And last year was the Statoil issue, of course, wasn't it? Yeah. Chris?
It's yet to be decided, but thanks for putting the pressure on while I'm on air. Yeah. I'd actually really like to go, and I'm talking to the whānau about seeing if they'd like to do it.
So I think it's a great thing for unions to also be part of. We've got strong Māori leadership in Unite Union. My old mucker Tina and Gina, G&T, they're in Sky City. Great women. The backbone of the union movement, always first to be there for other people. What I've been noticing over the years there is that where you do have a strong union on site, that people start opening up a bit, that it's not just the bread and butter issues. And there are some serious bread and butter issues in this town that we need to get fighting on, like housing and rent, for example. But also people are opening their minds to other things. Do you know what I mean? The climate change one, we had union people down there. And not just Māori, we were joined by our people from the Philippines who suffered the big climate change. Chinese workers who are sick of their air being polluted, There's something happening there, right? With the TPP, Actually, people starting to move from seeing all these single issue campaigns and then actually starting to think we have a more general problem. We have a problem with the system, that disrespects Indigenous people, destroys the earth and treats workers like slaves, like dirt. Do you think that's, there's a change in consciousness coming, Tress?
I think in the younger generation, yes, but not the oldies. I mean, John Key making a statement he'd still be going to Te Marae even after Kingi Total said, no way. I mean, you only have to look back at the Helen Clark affair when Te Whaiharawira got up and growled her for speaking on the marae. I mean, that thing's brought up every single year and it's no different. No disrespect, but there are tikanga and there's protocols on our marae. But at the end of the day, the Treaty of Waitangi was signed between two groups of people. And so we must honour that Māori and those who came to settle, and of course New Zealanders today. So I welcome everybody to Waitangi to enjoy the festivities, listen to the political and the social issues that are going on, the environmental issues and the forums, and join the hikoi. There's always going to be a hikoi because there's always going to be issues. If we don't get governments that give a crap about the everyday bread and butter issues, then there will always be struggle. Why can't we just get a nation that works?
Sure. All right. Well, I'd like to thank my guests today, to Chris, to Tracy, and to Gary. And look, it's going to be quite an exciting period coming up. Just any last words quickly, Gary? You've collected all your writings and your video and stuff from Paris, from the climate.
I was interviewing people and videoing some of the sessions, particularly the ones about stuff like unions and workers and Indigenous communities and frontline communities together, and how they're collaborating. So you can have a look at all that and report back so at the conference at www.climatejusticeaotearoa.org.
Excellent. Tress, where can we get the latest news from Marydom and from the Mana movement?
When I write it? No, just kidding. when Horny releases more media statements, I don't know. Just keep watching whānau. Mana's still around. We're going hard. We're not going anywhere. I think anything this new election year coming up is going to be quite interesting.
Oh, yeah?
If Labour can get together, yes.
Okay. You going to stand yourself?
Are you going to stand yourself?
No, I'd vote for you for mayor, though.
Another name is Jeremy Corbyn.
No. Yeah, rubbish. No. I'd vote for you for mayor. How about that? And Chris, where can we hear the latest from Etu?
We have a website, and so, but I can't remember the URL right now. So just Google Etu, E-T-U, New Zealand. Otherwise, you'll get the Electrical Trades Union from Queensland. And keep your ears and your eyes on the news. Go from there. But thanks for having me on, and I've enjoyed it, and we'll come back again sometime if you want.
Sure. Okay. And you've been listening to Workers' Voice, Unite Union's weekly radio station, program and podcast. And please share this around on the net. Support alternative media.
This show was produced by Unite Union. Listen to us every Saturday, 10:45 a.m.